On today's podcast, we're going to discuss how you react to issues, so stay tuned. Welcome to Warehouse Safety Tips. You can find the show notes to each episode, links to information mentioned on the podcast, the social media platforms we're on, and anything else related to the podcast at warehousesafetytips.com. Now, if you're a seasoned podcast listener, this podcast is going to be different from most you listen to. It's based around exactly what the name implies, warehouse safety tips. And since the people in this industry are busy, we know that time is money and each episode will be as short and to the point as possible. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the podcast. Right off the start of this podcast, I want to point out something that I've said on many previous ones before it, and that's talking about how current topics goes against maintaining an evergreen framework. If you haven't listened to previous episodes and/or aren't aware of evergreen in that context, it's simply keeping your topics timeless so that the info is relevant no matter when you listen to it. Now, the non-evergreen elephant in the room is the coronavirus pandemic that's occurring right now in the world. If anyone is listening to this podcast in the future, hopefully the coronavirus will have had a vaccine developed that keeps it at bay and/or it's been eradicated altogether and it will no longer be a timely subject. But what will be timely, and the reason I continually bring it up, is how we choose or chose to react to it. When attempting to create the light bulb, Thomas Edison could have taken the adversity that he was experiencing and just given up. Instead, he's quoted as saying, "I have not failed. I've found 10,000 ways that won't work." Another person that's more than familiar with adversity was Nelson Mandela. One of his famous quotes is, "I never lose. I either win or learn." Before moving on, here's a word from one of our sponsors. If you've ever been to or worked in a warehouse, you know just how important safety is to both management and staff. It's almost impossible to go 10 steps without seeing safety tape, angles, signs, and/or safety products. It's these items that show us how to be safe and avoid danger in the workplace. And if you're looking for the best products to make this happen, look no further than Mighty Line. Mighty Line floor signs and floor markings offer the best industrial products out there. We're proud to have Mighty Line as the official floor sign and floor marking company for the Warehouse Safety Tips podcast and site. Go to mightylinetape.com/safety tips to request a sample pack of their incredible safety signs and floor markings. Now back to the podcast. In the first part of this podcast, I mentioned how our country is still in the grips of the coronavirus pandemic and brought up a couple quotes of how notable people in history dealt with adversity. The question is, will safety teams and facilities focus on the downsides of this situation, or will they use it as a learning experience of how to make things better going forward? Whether you were fortunate enough to be considered essential and allowed to remain in operation, or when you return from the shutdown you've been in, take the time to implement the 6S methodology. That's sort, set in order or straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain for safety. Of course, you're going to be implementing and training on proper and heightened hygiene and social distancing, but don't stop there. Play chess instead of checkers. And what I mean by that is thinking several moves ahead. Look for potential hazards before they occur. Think of how your facility would react to a fire, a tornado, or storm, a gas leak, or a horrible situation, a shooting. Put yourself in a team member or staff's work area and see if they have everything they need and/or things that they don't, and anything else you can think of that will improve your facility. And make sure you document your findings for future discussions and/or put into action SOPs, standard operating procedures. In essence, don't lose, learn. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Warehouse Safety Tips. If you visit warehousesafetytips.com, you'll find the show notes for this episode and access to all of our blog posts, previous podcasts, advertiser information, and much more. Thank you for listening to Warehouse Safety Tips and have a safe day.